Hey everyone, this is Mike Wolf and welcome to the show. Today's conversation is a really interesting one. It's with Bill Lee, who's an advisor to an organization called friesDAO. If you haven't heard of friesDAO, it's this project that is basically trying to use Web3 and the blockchain to raise funds and acquire an existing fast food restaurant and possibly multiple restaurants and operate them. And really kind of started as a meme, a joke between a couple guys. Bill and his other friend Brett, who actually was the co-founder of Drizzly. And, this project with, legitimate backers like Bill and Brett just really got momentum. What started with as a kind of a joke, a meme, became something serious. And when they put it out there in the world, people took it very serious, got very excited about it. And what's happened in just a short matter of a month or two, they've raised over $4 million. They're hoping to raise up to $9 million in this effort and move very quickly to purchase and begin operating a restaurant this year, 2022. So Bill and I talk about the specifics of how you do something crazy like acquire a restaurant, how you kind of build a community, what are the specific nuances, and how do you do this? I mean, it's all very new, right? This hasn't really been done before, so they're pioneering in the space, and I really wanted to get an idea what this all means and how they're doing it. So Bill was very gracious to kind of talk to me about that. So I really enjoyed this conversation. If you were at our event last week where we talked about building food businesses and connecting to food businesses through Web3, through the metaverse at our event called Simulate, this is really a continuation of that and just kind of a deep dive. So I hope you enjoyed it last week. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. And we will be bringing Simulate back in May. So keep an eye out and ear out for more information about that because we want to continue the conversation. There's so much going on here. We're excited to continue that conversation. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Bill Lee of friesDAO. Hey, well, all right. I'm excited to be here with Bill Lee, who's an advisor to what is called friesDAO. And Bill, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. Happy to be here.
Yeah, and this is an interesting project that I think is worth kind of exploring. And I think it's a new concept. We just had our event earlier this week, Simulate, exploring the intersection between food and Web3, NFTs, etc. And this idea of like using DAOs just generally to kind of intersect with food is really interesting. But before we get into all this, how it's going to work, etc., what is the origin story behind friesDAO? Who thought of this, and why did you guys decide to actually pull the trigger on it?
Sure. It's a funny story. This project started out, I would say 90% as a meme. And it kind of over time evolved into more of a, I guess, 10% meme with real substance. But, taking a few steps back, this was kind of a few months ago when DAOs started becoming more tied into real world assets. And the most infamous one or well-known one is Constitution DAO. And I'm sure some folks might have seen that on the mainstream media where a bunch of crypto folks decided to get together and bid on a copy of the U.S. Constitution that was being auctioned from Sotheby's. I think that was back in November, and that put DAOs and this real world engagement from crypto kind of in the mainstream eyes, and a slew of copycats started coming about. And myself and a friend of mine, a buddy of mine, Brett, who's the co-founder of Drizzly, which is an alcohol delivery app. And he and I are in the crypto community, and we do a little trading, we do investments, joined a couple DAOs, found that a lot of these DAOs didn't operate quite well. And we just thought, from our business backgrounds, we could do this so much better. We can maybe organize a way better community. And there was always this joke that's been since, I guess, the beginning of crypto, where if you just traded very poorly, or if you lost a lot of money, there would be a running joke that you would work at McDonald's, that your next job was going to be a cashier at McDonald's. And that's always been a running meme in the crypto community. And we just thought it would be hilarious if we got together and said, let's try and buy a McDonald's as a DAO so we can guarantee ourselves a future job. And it was just a joke. And it was in the conversation for weeks and weeks and weeks. And we just, I guess at the end of December after Christmas, we said, let's just pull the trigger. Let's make a Discord, tell some folks, invite some folks, see if we can get something organized and see what happens. So we launched Discord, and within about 2 days' time, I think there was about 1,000 or 2,000 people that hopped into the server, surprisingly, and it was just a joke, right? But being that we had this message, people kind of started taking it seriously, where actual seasoned veterans in the franchising world and the food industry, as well as in the crypto world, of course, started reaching out to us and said, we can help. And we started brainstorming ideas, started kind of outlining possibilities that could work in the existing framework of crypto, with an existing framework of regulations, and it started materializing. And now we're kind of, even though we're the sort of the initial organizers, we're kind of serving this community now as more experienced business advisors and industry seasoned advisors to really take this into something of reality. So not necessarily McDonald's, but we're going to try to get something in the fast food realm as a crypto community.
So what started as a meme gained traction quickly. Why do you think that is? I mean, was it because of, you guys maybe have followings? Brett was the co-founder of Drizzly. Did people see who was behind it and say, hey, wow, this is exciting. We have like legit people looking at using something like a DAO to buy a fast food franchise?
Not even surprisingly. When Brett first started this with me, he was just totally anonymous. Nobody knew who he was. I had a little bit of reputation in the trading space. I am in some existing crypto community groups, so I shared a bit in those groups. I guess people in that then shared it out. So there was some traction from my side of things, but I think it's just the overall messaging and the novelty factor of DAOs.
Great timing too.
Yeah, exactly. So it just kind of happened organically, to be honest.
And so it starts taking off. You guys look at each other virtually or whatever. You go, wow, this thing's a thing. You have like other legit people coming in. And so you put together, like you said, a Discord server, but then you put together the documents, et cetera, to do and actually offer a token and everything. So that process, like, how did you do that? Like, was that something like you and Brett, do you have advisors come together? How did that all come together?
Yeah. We, obviously with anything in crypto, tokens are a way to sort of bind a collective effort, a collective goal. And that's a universal sort of language in crypto. So the tokens had always been a thing from the start. Let's start this meme group. We'll have a token in there. It'll be a meme token. And as people started joining, we realized that the pressure's on now, and people are actually wanting to do this for real. So we're going to have to actually look at whether this token is going to serve some sort of purpose. And the discussions started happening in the Discord, meeting people on WhatsApp and meeting people on Google Meetings, and learning from each other and sort of feeling our way out until we came up with more or less what we thought could be a viable endeavor. Somebody in the group volunteered, said, "Hey, I can smack a website together." Another person volunteered to put a more thorough documentation together. Another person volunteered to just even register the domain and an Ethereum address. So everybody was volunteering and pulling stuff in, and we sort of just got it organized and put something basic out there. And as time went on, we learned the process more and more from each other, and it became fleshed out to what is in its current state.
And yeah, we're at the point where you guys are, you've opened it up a little bit. People can buy in, I believe, or is it starting on February 5th? Is that today? Is it starting today?
It's actually going to start tomorrow officially
Okay.
for anyone to buy in. But at first, it was an invite only stage for a week,
Got it.
and that was kind of to reward or incentivize these early contributors that were active in the community and Discord, pitched ideas, put things together. So they were given the first opportunity to contribute.
So let's walk through what you get, right? So you're offering a token. I want to buy one tomorrow. What does that mean to me?
Sure. So we technically characterize this as a donation to the Treasury. And again, there are some regulatory aspects to this that we have to position it this way. But the token that you get is essentially a receipt almost. So it's a symbolic recognition of your contribution. But it does give you a say in how the DAO sort of evolves and operates. Although you technically don't need a token to be in the Discord, anybody can have a discussion, participate in discourse, and contribute ideas. But the token is going to be a part of a decision-making process in what's known as, in the crypto community, governance. So on the blockchain, we can actually post certain messages, what we call proposals, that can then be voted on. And depending on what the outcome of that vote is, we can determine how to actually use the treasury that we raise. And so to actually vote on that, you're going to need some way to keep track of who really is believing in the project enough that they contributed based on the amount early on through the treasury. You want to give them some sort of say in how they can shape the DAO on those final decision-making weighted votes. So that's the main purpose of the token. However, again, the token is more of a symbolic thing to give you that governance right. And there are also other incentives involved where you get a form of membership that is going to be issued as an NFT. And we continue to explore various other ways that we can sort of connect. Might actually
give me free hamburgers or something. Well, give me hamburgers when I walk in the. Is that?
That's the goal. It's that's the beauty of the DAOs. It's an evolving discussion. What kind of things that we can implement within the limitations of both the law and within the limitations of what we can negotiate with these restaurants that we want to actually acquire.
And I think we should say, as of today, this morning I checked, I think you guys have almost 3 million in the treasury.
Yeah, and we're
right?
about.
And I think you had a goal of like 9.5 million roughly. So talk about kind of how it's tracking.
Correct. So this is actually pretty on target with what we were predicting, because at the time when we did the invite only process, people were allocated a certain amount they were allowed to put in. You couldn't just go crazy and put everything that you wanted or anything. I mean, I'm sure they're going to be somebody that wants to just throw in $1 million. But that's not, that kind of takes away from the spirit of the DAO, because we didn't want the votes, since these tokens are going to give you some votes, to be weighted too heavily to a single entity, which in the crypto world is called a whale. So we sort of diversified a bit through this invite only process. So we make sure that there's at least a bit of variety in the types of people that would be able to have a vote later on. And it was allocated 6 million was the allocation through the invite process. And we sort of forecasted that not everybody is going to spend all that or use all that. And we predicted it was going to be about 3 mil by the end of this. So we're almost exactly on target here, which is great, and gives us the traction we need to when we move into the open raise.
And I haven't priced out the price of an existing operating McDonald's or other similar burger franchise or whatever fast food franchise, but you're getting into serious money at this point. Like, I don't know, have you looked around, like what it costs to buy a burger joint in New York City or Iowa?
Yeah, we have. And it depends. It depends on the brand. It depends on the location. It depends on the profitability, if it's an existing owner that wants to sell. So it varies quite greatly. You could get some place. I mean, if you wanted to do something that's not as well known as a brand, maybe like some sort of a quick type smoothie bar or something that's maybe a regional chain, that could be as low as a couple, $20,000 or $30,000. And if you move on to the higher end, if you get something that's like a McDonald's, or Popeyes, Burger King, one of these more well-known ones in a major city, it could go into 3, 4 million, 5 million territory, but you can have places like Chick-fil-A, which they do absolutely very well in terms of sales, and they're actually not that expensive, but they're very, very selective. They are, I think it's less than 1% of applicants would be able to actually get a Chick-fil-A. So they're very selective, but it's very low cost. So it depends. Looking at Subway, we've been looking at Subway. We've had some conversations on a preliminary basis recently with Subway. So there's Subway's anywhere from 100,000 to 500,000. So they're on the lesser upfront cost scale. So it varies greatly. We would say that the average store we would characterize as between $500,000 to $1 million.
And you've already probably started, and I think it's in the documentation, right? Like how you're going to distribute the treasury, or to a certain degree, you have some rough framework. I mean, do you have an idea? I mean, it ultimately probably depends on how much you raise, on what maybe you'll go for. Like maybe we're moving into McDonald's territory and moving out of smoothie joint territory at this point.
Right. Yeah, it certainly does depend on how much budget we can operate with. Yeah. But the goal here is to get a few stores. We're not looking to right off the bat just sort of dominate the franchise world and have our branded stores or our network of stores all over the country or all over the world right off the bat. This is going to be a process. But having the ability to say that we have more than one store, it will be quite a milestone in itself. So being able to get just more than one, let's just say two, is sufficient with the budget that we have. And I think that's the first step we need to take. And from the expansion process, there are other things that we're looking at that could help us continue to scale. In terms of the anticipated budget, if we get at least what we call a soft target of $5 million, that should give us enough to cover administrative costs, legal costs, maybe a bit of a treasury to incentivize, let's say, new advisors that would be value add to the community. And then with remaining, $3 or $4 million out of that $5 million soft target, would give us enough to get a couple stores and continue to scale, as well as maybe build certain other crypto related platforms that tie into the space, whether they're on-chain data analytics or something of that sort.
So help me out here. How does it actually work to start a fast food restaurant, a restaurant chain or a restaurant with a DAO? What does that look like?
Yeah, we talked about having that external contracted company to do it for us, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. It's not really important whether we buy a DAO or we finance. If we buy a fast food store or we finance a fast food store. What's important is what is that connectivity from those stores to the DAO and what's in that contractual agreement. So buying a store is possible through what we've talked about in these contract organizations to do it for us, to help do it for us. But it's also difficult because then we have to sort of manage the operations or supervise those operations on a high level basis for each individual store. Especially becomes difficult if, let's say, you have a geographic distance from the West Coast to the East Coast. You can't exactly have the same contracted operators because just geographical limitations, which means then you have to go get another operator. And that becomes quite a pain. You have to negotiate each one. It's quite a process. And that also involves the brand. You have to get the brand involved in the conversation. They have to understand what you're trying to do and have certain limitations. So one of the other options we're looking at is actually financing existing owners that want to, let's say, buy a second store. Maybe they already have a KFC that they or a Pizza Hut or a Domino's, and they want to get a second store. Well, we can certainly become a financing sort of organization where we say, hey, you've got the experience, we've got the money. Why don't we give you $1 million so you can go get that second store? But you do the negotiation with the brand. We don't have to do it as the DAO. But in that contract, you'll have to give us some sort of benefit to the DAO back. And usually in that case, it would be maybe a form of, promotional kickbacks or discounts, because there's some leeway or allowance from brands that give the regional or the individual stores that flexibility. So we can say, look, we'll give you $1 million. We'll give it to you at 0% interest, which would be way better than obviously than a bank. But in exchange, for the next 5 years, you're going to give us X dollars of food kickbacks to anybody that comes in your store and holds a friesDAO NFT. And that would create that sort of connectivity between the token holders, the NFT holders, and those stores. And so if we can scale in that process, it would be much faster. There's a lot less negotiation involved with the brand, and a lot less restrictions, and also a lot more accessibility to seasoned operators and seasoned owners without having us to supervise the details of it, but rather they just need to pay back the loans to the treasury. And so that, if we pull that off, then we can probably scale into, one store, one friesDAO network store in every single major city, whether in the country or whether in the world. But if we have that sort of network, now the NFT and the friesDAO membership becomes something of quite considerable value. And I don't necessarily mean value in monetary value, but rather a social currency. Now the community is actually much more tight-knit, and now you can go to one of these stores and realize, hey, I got this digital crypto thing that actually has some real world utility to it. And that's going to be quite valuable in itself, and novel.
And it seems like buying an existing franchise, you're obviously going to be have to adhere to the rules and regulations. Like, you couldn't take a McDonald's and suddenly change the name. It's now friesDAO. From a consumer-facing standpoint, right? So you aren't necessarily looking to build like a consumer-facing brand in that a consumer would know, hey, this is a unique restaurant because it's run differently, run by a DAO, and all the different kind of value systems that brings. That's not part of your intention to really kind of, hey, gain consumer awareness through that, because at that point you might actually kind of want to start an entirely new franchise or something like that.
Yeah, it is actually in our, remote pipeline at this stage to eventually consider operating stores directly. That might not necessarily have to be a brand that is is an existing franchise brand. We could very much well just start a friesDAO restaurant, just a straight up friesDAO branded restaurant. But that's a different type of endeavor that is nuanced, and you have to do the detailed day-to-day operations, And at this stage, as we're still sort of exploring how we organize into these real world operations, that might be a bit too much on our plate. So it's part of the reason why we selected to do franchising, because it's almost a turnkey product, right? They give you an existing model that we can follow. So that minimizes the nuanced governance and reduces inefficiencies of especially a decentralized community in sort of governing, operating it. So in the initial stages, it's going to be very difficult to have a brand allow us to operate with too much freedom in terms of their rules of their brand, of their model, and I think the community understands that, and I think the community isn't necessarily keen to say, all right, well, we want this menu item to be exactly $1.59 or something. It's not going to be nuanced at that stage, right. And the brand is certainly not going to allow that. For a DAO is a bit too exotic for the franchise brands to own the actual stores. So what we have to do is contract out a third party, whether that third party is a community member or just somebody that we negotiate with a contract they're obligated to the DAO to operate, is something obviously to be decided. But that makes the brands much more at ease, because it would be something more familiar. It's a traditional entity, a traditional legally or state recognized entity that they're comfortable in having them own. So that would be how we have to structure it in the beginning. But again, being able to just even do that alone, it would be quite a feat, quite a milestone in the crypto space or in general. So achieving that milestone is number one. the nuances of running the actual day-to-day, the detailed restaurant is secondary to first getting a restaurant. And if we are able to achieve that and show that a community-run operation is going to, be able to generate profits for those stores, it's run well, whether we do it directly or through a contracted operator, that will allow this proof of concept to be realized and give confidence to those brands that hopefully down the road allows us to then open up more negotiations and ask for flexibility or the right to change more detailed elements of that operation.
That makes a lot of sense, right? You have to make a franchise comfortable with what you're doing here. So you have to put that kind of intermediary in between. Kind of the next evolution of this, I'd be interested to discuss. If you've heard of friesDAO, I've talked to them. They're looking at actually using whatever they raise initially to basically hire a ghost kitchen operator, whether that's like a Kitchen United or someone, which makes sense because you actually need someone who actually is experienced running a restaurant for a virtual brand. So talk about like kind of the next wave. So when maybe the friesDAO that you build, like maybe whenever that isn't part of the evolution, how does that operate it?
In terms of the community itself, how do we operate it?
Do you need to hire employees? Do you hire like kind of almost a turnkey operator, like a ghost kitchen operator, or like, you know what I mean? Like how would you? Because you need like a chief operating officer, or like you need an operations person, right? You need et cetera. So how are they become employees of a DAO? What does it look like?
Yeah. One of the things that we're looking at right now is actually registering this DAO. Actually, we've already began the process, but we're registering this DAO under the state of Wyoming. So Wyoming has a DAO framework that's recognized by the state called a DAO LLC as a type entity. And Wyoming is great because they were actually the pioneers of the LLC type entity, which is quite popular these days for companies to form as. So now they're pioneering DAO LLC. I think they pioneered it last year, and so we've seen a couple DAOs now form under that. An advantage that it gives is it allows us to enter into contractual obligations or contracts with other legally recognized entities, and that will be a critical process in getting these third-party operators, these contractors, to do it, as well as potentially employ staff members that would be adhering to the DAO's objectives or the DAO's payroll, if we can put it that way. So that's one of the first steps, getting this capacity to actually execute and enter into agreements. In terms of actually employing people, I don't foresee the community, and I don't encourage the community to hire people under the DAO directly, but rather, again, contract out to an operator and just, state, here's the budget, or give us the proposal how you're going to do this, and let's see if it fits in the budget. That all that information, all the details, all this game plan for, let's say, a 3-year operation is then proposed to everybody in DAO, and these token holders will vote on it, and that money gets released on a certain schedule to those operators, and those operators will make the decision in terms of the hiring process to actually manage the DAO, manage the stores, whether on as a manager or whether as shift supervisors and employees, whatever it is. Those detailed nuances are probably not going to be managed by the DAO directly. Maybe in the future, as we get more organized, but we'll probably let the contract operators call more of the high level, or we'll do more of the high level stuff, and they'll call the shots on more of the detailed stuff. So again,
the day-to-day operations is going to be run by the contractors, and high-level oversight would be, you guys at a very high level and your community.
Correct. Yes.
So the DAO, by its definition, brings transparency, right? So, and one of the things I thought was interesting as I was looking through your documentation is talking about eventually on-chain integration of a fast food restaurant. And you talked about incorporating with IoT, et cetera, Machine 5 to bring data and kind of an understanding of what's happening in operations. Talk about that. I mean, I think that's really interesting. We at the Spoon and in the restaurant tech space, people have been talking and looking at software and the increasing digitization of the back of house. And so there's some companies building software stacks that allow you to kind of manage and operate and understand the different cooking equipment and even kind of understand what people working in the back of house are doing. on a minute by minute basis. What are your thoughts there? How do you kind of see this happening in terms of like bringing the operations on chain?
We certainly have a vision of that being the case. It's going to be a key part for any sort of crypto or DAO or decentralized operation to manage a real world asset. It removes or minimizes the need for a middleman that has to go through some sort of trust factor or reputation factor. But the more information that you can put on chain, which is obviously a tamper-proof mechanism of storing data, the less centralization is needed. So one of the ideas that we have is things like the point of sale devices. When you capture those transactions from customers, that data can be immediately stored and captured on the blockchain. Which chain that is not important at this stage. Maybe Ethereum, maybe something that's more efficient. But that data being stored can then be viewed by anybody. And you can also build additional platforms or software or other smart contracts that can interpret that data in different ways and present it in different ways, and make it maybe more UI friendly or friendly for somebody to actually understand that's not well versed in code. But being able to do that allows people to then see the real time operations of the store and then make a decision as a decentralized community without having to wait on some sort of CFO or some accounting guy to tell you, oh, here's how it's going, but rather it's all on chain and directly coded. We can do other things like even I don't know. Let's just say hypothetically speaking, we've got Flippy Bot, which is a robot that right now that flips burgers essentially, or I think they can do French fries soon. I don't remember, but even having that, you can count how many times did this bot produce a burger. You can have supply chain sort of tracking elements in various ways, but being able to store all that data allows us to really take crypto into a new level that actually can be integrated into real world assets. And this is something that crypto has always tried to explore back when Ethereum was first introduced with smart contracts in 2016, 2017. And there was this big boom at the time where everybody was trying to put stuff on the blockchain, from food to biotech to logistics, everything. They were trying to fit it all on the blockchain, even the weirdest stuff. But it just didn't work because they were trying to fit a square hole or fit a square peg into a round hole. It just didn't make sense. They're trying to brute forcing it. And now we've come to 2020, 21 era, and people have sort of figured out that crypto is more of a financial thing, and they built this thing called decentralized finance, DeFi, where there's all these protocols that can do on-chain loans. So there was this financial aspect to it, but it's very incestuous, meaning that the only reason why there's intrinsic value in crypto right now is because there are people trading it. So crypto is valuable only because there's crypto people in it, and not so much that there's external value being created through real world assets, essentially adding to a society's GDP. That's not tied yet into crypto. But because we went through this 2017 and then this 2020, 21 era, we're probably going to begin migrating into the emergence of those two things, and finally being able to have the necessary software and financial tools and what's known as these DeFi mechanics married into these real world transaction tracking processes. So therefore, if you have an IoT product that can store real world data on chain, and that data flows into the decentralized finance, without being too technical, it allows us to now combine these two aspects into a real-world operation managed directly on the blockchain by a decentralized community without needing a trusted centralized actor. So DAOs are probably going to be that gateway into marrying those two things that we've seen in the latest last two crypto sort of bull cycles.
So that kind of the last great bull or bear market in crypto, folks took a hard look at a lot of those kind of early utopian ideas of like putting real world stuff on the blockchain. And like you said, it was a square peg round hole situation, but we've seen a lot of hard work done in the past few years, and it's now kind of like becoming, there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes, absolutely.
In terms of being able to do that, it sounds like. Does it make any sense for folks who aren't in a DAO, right? If I'm just like a corporation, to eventually kind of connect these real, I mean, this is kind of getting out of what you're doing, but from where you view things, does it make sense for folks who are, operating a restaurant or running a food company to put things on chain if it's not associated with the DAO? I mean, just kind of from an operation standpoint, or does it really only make sense in the context of, hey, well, we're having a DAO kind of overarching management structure. We need that level of transparency. That's why it makes sense for us.
I mean, corporations, the traditional way of operating these corporations, they're going to continue to exist. And there's going to be a lot of resistance in terms of these larger companies that, just don't want to share their information. There's a lot of, proprietary information that gives them competitive advantage. So it's understandable that a lot of these companies are not going to be entering the space. However, it's not wise from my personal basis, from the many years that I've been innovating in business. It's not wise to just completely shut out these new evolving processes. I mean, we've seen things where Kodak refused to sort of cannibalize their film business by neglecting the digital camera business, and it didn't do them well. And we've seen companies like Apple, who understood that cannibalization is necessary to survive. They had the iPod, they were successful, but Steve Jobs realized that people were going to play music on their phones, and they said, well, let's get into smartphones, and they cannibalized themselves with it. And here they are as, the dominant, smartphone makers in the world. So these corporations, it would be wise for them to understand that there's something here with decentralization, with community operations. And we are here to put that to the test and to really prove out this proof of concept that we can actually operate this successfully. Because if we do so, I think these companies would start paying much more attention to how we operate. And what is the advantage of a decentralized community in operating this? It's that there is a level of participation that is way beyond just sort of being passive versus a traditional, company stock shareholder, where again they're just waiting for the board or the executive team to make these decisions. Here, you're essentially almost a prediction market. Meaning that you have a large enough population, a statistically significant population, that could direct the company, or rather the organization, the DAO, into a more accurate, actionable result. So, if you think about it from a democracy versus an authoritarian run government, the authoritarian government may be quick, but if they make the wrong decision, it's going to be very detrimental. Whereas in the democracy, it's much slower, but the advantage is oftentimes their outcome favors what the people want, right? So that's a different type of operation that now with crypto and tokenization enables the ability to actually execute, because there's a say in how you spend that treasury, how you spend the money. And if you imagine a DAO versus, let's say, a traditional company where they have a concern about some store operations, why is this particular burger not doing so well? Why is this particular way of promoting this campaign not doing so well? Well, now you can go into the DAO and say, hey guys, well, this operation is not so great. What are we doing about this? What's wrong with it? And there's going to be people putting all these ideas in, all the stuff. And they're going to be telling the truth. They're essentially a focus group that's incentivized to tell the truth, because as a token holder, you now want the best for your own sort of stake in this whole organization. And so you're going to think you are incentivized naturally, inherently, to give the most optimal answer. And when you collect those optimal answers, you're able to now execute the best decision for the organization. And those companies, traditional companies, these corporations, don't exactly have that privilege or liberty. They're going to have to go and hire a marketing company. They're going to have to find a focus group, and they're paying these people. But they're not necessarily going to be incentivized to naturally tell you the exact correct result. And we've seen that case and over and over in the history of companies that run. So this will be an interesting experiment to see if a novel way of organizing and operating a real world store is going to be successful. And from my personal basis, I think it will be. It is something that we are going to naturally evolve into.
We've seen, and I've written about this idea of just the great decentralization of food. You're seeing kind of a couple hundred years of like industrial manufacturing progress to where everything is kind of built in warehouses and distributed via supply chains. That's starting to kind of break down a little bit as you see the ability to do hyperlocal manufacturing. You see, things like virtualized restaurants, et cetera. So this kind of aligns, interestingly, I think, with this idea of like, we're seeing a great decentralization across a lot of industries, including food, and you're bringing it to the restaurant.
I mean, we've seen how we've, in the last 10 years, moved much more deeply into the gig economy. So, people doing their own thing and not necessarily working 9 to 5s. And it's a natural evolution to move further towards a decentralized process. And I do want to add, as a DAO, it's not just people that are having a say or putting their opinion in, but the DAO is also an entity that invites people who have experience and could be existing franchise owners or operators to join the community. So it could very well get to a stage, and this is what we want to move towards, is when we get that first 1 or 2 stores, to share our experiences as the key advisors and this initial team that is pulling this off for the community. But we want to share our successes and also obviously our failures and what we've learned in the process, and establish a framework to the DAO so that anybody else in the DAO who has some experience or that comes into the DAO with experience can take that framework and organize with other members who, let's say, have some financing experience. Another guy owns a couple stores already, and another guy, understands the legal side of things. And they all get together and they say, yeah, let's reproduce this. There's a great place down by, the mall in whatever city they're in, and let's put a McDonald's right there in that corner. I think that would be a great spot, and we've got the experience to pull it off. They make a proposal to the Treasury. Anybody can make a proposal. And they can say, we want to spend this much dollars from Treasury, and here's our game plan. Everybody can take a look, and they could pull this off, and they can just copy what we've done in terms of the legal framework, in terms of the negotiation process, and it would be a learning process for everybody in the DAO. So anybody can come in the DAO and just form these little collective groups, and that's what sort of the decentralized process is. And so it is almost in itself a gig economy within the context of an organization in its own ecosystem or microcosm.
You guys have gotten a lot of kind of press in kind of the crypto world. I imagine the food world is going to start paying attention a little bit. Have you had any of the players in the kind of technology meets food space reach out to you? Like you mentioned, point of sale. Like, and you don't have to name names, right? But you have the Toast of the world, the Clovers. I'm just curious if you've had anyone since you guys have come out, like say, hey, we want to kind of maybe work with you. We want to maybe help you bring data on chain, et cetera.
Yeah, not quite in that regard. Most of the people that have reached out for us are either folks that want to participate in the community as a member, or otherwise media. I think in terms of what you're talking about, I think there's kind of hold their breath and wait kind of situation going on. Obviously, our raise kind of just started. It's only been going on for a week. So I think people are waiting to see how much do we raise? Do we hit our goals? Can these guys get organized? What's the regulatory aspect of it? So they're kind of doing a wait and see. But I think, again, if we get that first store, that's going to open a lot of conversation with these other parties. So that's going to be the main goal that we got.
Yeah, that'll validate you. I think you guys already kind of have some level of validation with the amount of funds you've raised so quickly. I'm excited for that eventual next phase where you may look at opening your own friesDAO. You mentioned the Flippy robot. I could see completely automated
Yeah.
kind of connected DAO run restaurant chain could be kind of fun to watch.
Yeah, and I think that's again another natural step that society is going to move towards. I think there's just going to be increasing automation. Obviously, we're not keen to seeing people be put out of work, but I think just in terms of as technology advances, there's just going to be a natural progression into automation and robots. And in the long scheme of human civilization, I think that's going to be a good thing because people will learn new skills, human civilization will adapt, and the day-to-day sort of more menial tasks can be done by machines as we can sort of hopefully reap the fruits of that and enjoy the benefits from automation and as a civilization. But as we move towards that, then you're going to have to be able to manage the data that's coming out of these machines. And so again, blockchain unlocks the ability to manage that data in a decentralized manner, which fits perfectly for the DAO. And it obviously depends on what we can negotiate with the stores in terms of the brands. But if we have our own store, then we have obviously much more flexibility. But by the time we are trying or attempting to do our own store, I think we're going to have already a lot of experience as an organization under our belt.
All right. Hey, well, Bill Lee with friesDAO, thank you so much for taking time, telling us a little bit about what you're doing there and educating us.
Mike, thank you so much for having me. It was really a great experience.
Well, that was pretty interesting, right? I mean, pretty crazy what they're trying to do. Innovative. I enjoyed the conversation with Bill and find it fascinating. And we'll continue to follow along the story of friesDAO with what they're building on the Spoon. So follow along with us. And we'll continue to bring you stories from other people pioneering in the space as well. So, all right, that's it for now. We'll talk to you next week.